Well, we are going to move here now to the story that is really roiling U.S. politics. Of course, that's the attempted assassination of Donald Trump that took place, and of course, everything that's happening after that, with the Republican National Convention coming right after, and some of the fallout implications, all of that, of all of this, we want to discuss. And we are very honored to be joined here on the show by Dr. Ben Becker, who's the editor-in-chief of Breakthrough News. Great outlet. Thank you for being here. Sorry, I should have said that.
No problem. Very happy to be here again.
Well, Ben, of course, we were chatting on Saturday, I believe it was, when this took place. I mean, it really was very, but I don't know, maybe for some people it wasn't unexpected. I did not expect to see that news, and it seems that it really has, in many ways kind of shifted the tenor and the tone of the campaign to some degree, certainly shifted some elements of, I think, how the RNC is being messaged. So, I mean, I guess maybe my first question for you here is, what are some of your maybe big picture takeaways about what this means, this attempted assassination on Trump, what it has actually meant in terms of the direction of the political race here for president?
Obviously, the first thing is it's been extremely favorable for Trump, how the political fallout that is. I think not only did the Democrats, they took their ads right off of TV immediately. They canceled their campaign events. They were already trailing significantly Biden. And I think it really cemented Trump's role as the front runner. He has the iconic photograph now, raising his fist with blood dripping down his face, saying fight. This image of him as an unstoppable figure, someone who's been targeted but succeeding. He was already saying things like that. So this seems to confirm that, and you can kind of put it in stark contrast with the feebleness of Joe Biden. So in terms of how it's politically playing, I also thought it was interesting that Elon Musk and others immediately rushed to endorse him. They had been playing footsie with Trump for months, but to come out, within hours of this attempted assassination and say, now we have to endorse Trump, you really see the billionaire class has swarmed Trump. I think the most recent figure I saw this morning was 60 different billionaires are now officially backing the campaign. Elon Musk announces he's going to put $45 million a month into the campaign, when previously he was saying he's not going to put any money into the presidential campaign. So you have all these things happening at once. And in a way, the Democrats are now holding their criticisms or muting their criticisms. Whereas a week ago when we spoke, it was all about how he's an existential threat to democracy. Now that quote unquote rhetoric has been proclaimed as somehow divisive, and they want to be seen as the institutional party, the responsible party, somehow Donald Trump has become a unifying figure. I mean, it's actually quite absurd, and it raises the question about whether did they ever really believe their rhetoric? Because if he's an existential threat, then why do we have to sort of rally in the name of national unity, including Donald Trump? Biden says, we just have disagreements with Donald Trump. Well, I thought he was an existential threat. So the Democratic messaging has become quite confused. The Republicans are still going on the offensive, although I think in a somewhat different way in the RNC than they would have otherwise. And JD Vance's speech was one part of that, but we'll see what Trump says tonight.
Well, Ben, since you mentioned JD Vance, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on him as a vice presidential pick? And I know that sounds like a really boring question, but this is not a boring guy, and that's not in a positive sense. This is somebody whose entire career has been funded by the tech billionaire, the anti-China extremist tech billionaire, Peter Thiel, who has, his foreign policy sucks, his domestic policy sucks for a lot of reasons. He's also quite young, and I think that can do well for somebody like Trump, who's quite old. But I'm just curious on your thoughts and what that means about the direction that a potential Trump administration might take with someone like this in the vice presidential position.
I mean, vice presidents don't typically shape the politics that much in U.S. politics. I mean, Dick Cheney was a exception to that. But in any case, I think the appointment of JD Vance is very significant for anybody who cares about, the future of the working class, the future of the country, the future of global politics. JD Vance, in a way, has been now named the heir apparent to Trump. And Trump is constitutionally limited to 2 terms. So the idea of Vice President Vance, which I think is more and more likely given the direction of the race, they're positioning him for President Vance, if you can believe that. I think that when I watched the speech last night, I thought JD Vance is a very talented demagogue. And I understand why they picked him, because he speaks to a certain audience and in a certain manner that allows the Republican Party to present itself falsely as a party of the working class, a party that's against war, a party that really can relate to people who are struggling. It started with his book, Hillbilly Elegy. It's all quite fraudulent. I mean, there are elements of his story, his personal story, that are true. But the idea that this guy, who's actually, his whole career, as you said, has been propped up by like a supervillain tech billionaire, that his previous jobs were in venture capital, whose whole idea is that they can basically get into new markets and destroy jobs, extract the value. This is in the equity firms that he worked with, destroy the value of the existing jobs, or develop new businesses that basically put whole industries out of work. So, it's actually amazing that same person could stand up in front of the RNC and talk about bringing jobs back and doing this and doing that and relating to the common man and all that. I mean, in a way, the Republican Party is trying to take the place of the Democratic Party, which for decades was the party that presented itself as the pro-working class party and in some ways the anti-war party. I mean, it's almost laughable when you think about how in bed the Democratic Party was with Wall Street and with the war makers, but that was their presentation. And as the Democratic Party, I would say, abandoned any policies that could have potentially, helped the working class, that's created a vacuum that the Republicans are now gladly stepping into. So you have JD Vance talking about the working class and the ruling class. He actually said the ruling class twice last night. These were class terms that were basically forbidden in all American politics for years. The Democrats would only even say the middle class. But the fact that there actually is no working class party allows the 2 ruling class parties to pretend to be the working class party. And so I think his speech was a way of presenting in that way, even though the Republican Party has actually no program and can possibly develop a program that would help the working class, because they're working hand in hand with Wall Street the whole way. At the same time, people are hurting in this country, and there's been 30 million mass layoffs since 1996. That's a fifth of the work. 30 million. I mean, when you think about that, a mass layoff is when you get laid off with 49 of your coworkers or more. That's happened to 30 million people in this country. So who has an answer to that? So in truth, neither the Democrats nor Republicans have an answer to that. It would be easy to fix. So lacking an answer, they can just sort of pretend, and they can say, well, we know people are hurting, and you're dealing with addiction, and you're dealing with suicide, and you're dealing with homelessness and unemployment, and the last guy in power is the one who betrayed you. But the next guy in power, he's going to be the one to help you. So in a way, the Republicans have learned from the demagogy of the Democrats, is what I'd say.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and I think it speaks to people's total disgust with the political system. I mean, the Data for Progress recently did a poll on, so-called swing voters, 60% of whom, by the way, said they wanted the government to actually have more social programs and do more for working class people. 52% of whom, by the way, are not culturally conservative, maybe is the best way to put it, or at least are willing to, coexist with others who they know are not culturally conservative. But what was notable is, when they broadened out the poll to not just Trump and Biden, but to include many third-party candidates, Trump and Biden went to like single digits in support among swing voters. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I don't think is much of an alternative, but nonetheless is outside the 2 major parties, sort of surged to the top of the plurality of, I think, 40-some% of those voters. The others that were polled, Jill Stein and Cornel West, also doing very significant. And I'm just raising that to say that, does it feel that the sort of fraudulence of this is clear enough on both sides? I mean, obviously obviously the Democrats and Republicans have their supporters, they have their partisans, they have the people who they've scared into voting for them no matter what. But it does seem when you look at, the debate, the first debate was one of the lowest rated debates that has existed. The RNC from the first night to the second night, the drop off was massive. You have the sort of rise of independents and third parties and others becoming more significant in a way. You're even seeing in the Senate, the growth of independents as candidates and so on and so forth. So anyway, I'm just saying, does it seem that there is a shift potentially happening here, whether or not it's going to happen, the next year or 2 years, where the sort of existing two-party system could start to fracture to some degree, as we've seen in the past when there have been great sort of challenges and inflection points for the United States?
I mean, there's 63% of people who say they would support a third party, who are basically tired of the two-party system, want a third or maybe a fourth party. And of course, we know many systems across the globe have third and fourth parties. And there are moments in U.S. history prior to the Civil War in particular, but some afterwards where third parties started to take off. I think people are definitely open to it. And I think people want it. What people want exactly, though, has yet to really crystallize. I mean, I think the sort of a progressive third party, a Labor Party that speaks to all the issues you're talking about, would be very popular. But there's a conundrum, which is that if the ruling class stays totally united, which they basically are, I mean, the parties themselves haven't come apart. So there are efforts to try to build parties from below. And there have been over the decades. But it's at those moments that you see the two corporate parties basically unite to keep third parties off the ballot. So in Georgia, for instance, last week, the Democratic Party filed notice to put the PSL off the ballot, to take the Green Party off, RFK, Cornel West. And then in the other states where other right-wing parties get on, the Republicans will try to remove them. So, and then both parties will work together to keep third parties out of the debates. So, there's basic structural problems where nobody wants to vote third party, or fewer people want to because they feel like they're wasting their vote, that is not viable. But of course, if everyone thinks that way, then it becomes true. But then in cumulative, when you see 63% of the people actually want a third party, you see that there could be a breakthrough. So I think that, there's all the contradictions in both parties that could allow that to happen, but it remains to be seen. It kind of requires a level of bravery on certain ruling class figures, bravery on the part of organized labor, for instance, to want to break away from the Democrats. I haven't seen a lot of that kind of bravery. I think we talked last week about how the Squad and the progressives, who you would think would have an axe to grind against Biden, have in fact been the ones who have been defending him to the very last moment. I mean, you even have Pelosi, Schumer, Obama coming out saying basically that Biden should step aside, or that maybe it's time, that he's dragging down the House and the Senate. And yet you have the progressives who are still sticking by him, even though Biden's whole position, the fact that he's even the candidate, was an anti-progressive corporate candidate, a way to block the progressives. So if there ever a moment to break free of this two-party system, this would be it. And I think a lot of people are thinking in that way, and they're just trying to now figure out who their options are.
And Ben, I mean, I know it's not always the best to make predictions, but it does seem like we're moving in the direction of Biden eventually having to step down. The chorus of Democrats in leadership positions calling for that to happen, it's growing. I mean, there was the donor class that started, and of course, the Democrats follow the donor class because it's basically a corporation. And now you've got leaders like Adam Schiff and like Chuck Schumer suggesting that this may need to happen, and others as well. So I'm just curious, do you think it's inevitable that we're going to see a different candidate from the Democrats?
If you had asked me yesterday, I would have said no. Today, I would say it's likely based on how things have shaken out. Who knows what tomorrow brings? Either way, I don't think it's anything to get excited about, to be honest. I mean, there's nothing.
What?
I mean,
this could change the party, Ben. I'm sorry. I can't even say that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, they'll probably put Kamala Harris there, who obviously it's a facelift compared to Biden. She's able to speak much better than Biden, and she's able to get around and seems healthier and has greater endurance and attention span and so forth. But she represents the exact same policies, And in a way, there's something very fitting about Biden and Trump being the two representatives, the two faces of the capitalist political system right now. That's quite clarifying. So there's part of me that says Biden should, him staying in is in a way the most accurate face of what the system has become. So yeah, I mean, I think it's likely that he'll come out, but it still won't mean that the working class or oppressed people or all the people that are hurting in this country now have a great option in front of them. Again, I think that there were attempts to have a progressive rebellion inside the Democratic Party. Those were all extinguished and squelched. Joe Biden was running in third and fourth place in the 2020 primaries. He never polled above 20%. He never got over 20% in those initial primaries. So for him to be, again, in the teens in terms of approval ratings, or I think it was 18% of the country believes he's now mentally fit and fit to run for office. Only 36% of Democratic voters who voted for him in 2020 want him to stay in the race. 36%. That means almost 2 in 3 want him to drop out. So at this point, it's just an incredible display of egomania and arrogance for him to even stay in whatsoever. But again, he wasn't someone who ever really earned his spot. He was put there to be the face of Wall Street. And whoever gets in there, let's Kamala Harris, let's say, or Gavin Newsom, who I heard referred to at a county fair recently as Gavin Hairspray, if people want to just use that one. But Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, either one, they'll just have their own group of billionaire donors. So like, okay, we'll have a Republican with 60 billionaire donors. Maybe the Democrats will have their 60 billionaire donors. And if they're contributing, $45 million a month to take the example of Elon Musk, imagine what they're getting out. If they're putting in $150 million on the front end, imagine what they're getting out on the back end. And imagine what they're going to get in terms of their return on their investment. These are capitalists. So why are they investing so much in these parties? Because they want to get a return. So regardless of who replaces Joe Biden, it's going to be someone of that ilk.
No, very good point, and always worth reminding people that the Trump tax cut gave the richest billionaires and 100 millionaires $1 trillion in wealth. So you can see they are getting a lot out of that. But as always, really appreciate you being able to help us sort through all of this. Dr. Ben Becker, Editor-in-Chief of Breakthrough News, thank you so much for joining us here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks for having me.